Thank you very much, Nick. If I could just get a thumbs up from the audience that you can hear me. All right, thumbs up for hearing me, thumbs down for hotels and networks, okay? It's my pleasure to join you remotely today. I originally had planned to be delivering the keynote from Boston in an immersive virtual environment, but at the last moment, I was called to New York for work, and through the fine efforts of Nick, we were able to coordinate up and still pull it off. So thank you, Nick, and also thank you to the committee for considering me for a keynote today. I'd like to go ahead and begin by talking about immersive education, and in particular, giving you somewhat of an inside look at immersive education. My name is Aaron Walsh, and as Nick has mentioned, I'm faculty at Boston College. I've been using immersive virtual environments since 1997 to teach remote classes, distance classes, and have also done hybrid classes online. Happy to say that since 1997, the technology has come a long way. It wasn't that good in 97. It's a lot better now. And now 1,000 flowers have bloomed, and there's such an array of technologies to show you. I can't really squeeze them in, but I can give you a taste of them tonight. Tonight for me, it's a little after 9:30 here, morning for you. I'm also the director of the Immersive Education Initiative, and if you'd like to touch base with me, the easiest way is through immersiveeducation.org. There's a contact the director button. So I'll head to the next slide. And the question, of course, is why? I've dedicated almost 20 years of my life to immersive education, and I had a fundamental belief once I started to use the technologies that we could change people's lives if we could change the way they learn by using advanced technologies. It really is that simple. The Immersive Education Initiative started almost a decade later. So we're looking now at the next slide at the overview of the organization. So after nearly a decade of using the technology at Boston College, it became clear that this was here to stay and that it would become bigger, better, and stronger. It was already doing that. And so in 2005, a nonprofit international collaboration of universities, colleges, research institutes, museums, consortia, and companies were formed. That's the Immersive Education Initiative. They work together to advance these technologies, the knowledge of these technologies, and the application of these technologies, all in the service of education. In a simple line, it's using immersive technologies for education. Now, what those immersive technologies are the things that people most frequently ask. So we'll touch on that, I think, today, and it'll probably give you a sense of what we talk about when we say virtual worlds, augmented reality, game-based learning, and these types of systems. Today, the initiative is worldwide. There are thousands of faculty, researchers, staff, and administrators around the world who together represent millions of students who are using these technologies. And one of the benefits of membership, which is free to academics and nonprofits, is access to these technologies and also to the innovators who are using these technologies and the people who are designing and building them, the actual inventors of them. On the next slide, we'll take a look at intellectual property. Initially, the initiative was focused exclusively on open and royalty-free technologies. It had to be intellectual property agnostic, meaning nobody owned it, and you couldn't prohibit anybody from using it. We adhere to everything that we construct, everything that we create, and everything that we produce is still produced under this open and royalty-free intellectual property policy, which is pretty deep. The question is, what is open? And we've defined it as 7 different levels of openness so that as an academic or a nonprofit or even a commercial entity that wanted to use these technologies, they would be certain that they would never ever have a roadblock in their way once they started to adopt them. We've constructed or been working in this environment so long that it became clear that this new generation of technologies that was coming out were not open. There's a lot of great open technology out there, but there's also a lot of proprietary commercial technology. So last year at ITEC 2012, which is our annual summit, we opened to non-commercial technologies, or probably non-open technologies, meaning now it's a blend. And we do a job of informing the educators what is open and what are commercial. So this will be the first time we start to actually use commercial technologies in immersive education. On the next slide, you can see what our official virtual world platforms are. As of this year, there are only 4 officially endorsed immersive education virtual world platforms, and they're listed here: Open Wonderland, Open Simulator, Real Extend, and Open Cobalt. But as you can see, there are also a number that are now being evaluated for potential endorsement by the organization. There's a lot of activity going on in this space. Some of these are commercial, some of them are open. In fact, earlier tonight, as I was doing testing with Nick, I was in a virtual world environment called Avaya Live Engage. My students in Boston met me there in this 3-dimensional environment, and we were conducting a summer session. They're doing an intense summer intensive course that ends at 9:15 p.m. Boston time. So I was doing that virtually while Nick and I were also preparing for today's keynote. So the question I think that most people have, if you haven't seen this technology before, or if you haven't encountered the term immersive education before, the question is, what is immersive education? In a nutshell, it's a suite of technologies. Those technologies include virtual worlds, learning games, simulations, and what we call FAM, full augmented and mixed reality. We also utilize new creative computing technologies such as Scratch and Alice, if you've heard of those, but those aren't immersive in the sense of the others that you see on the screen here. And if the audiovisual crew could do me a favor and just cue up the video that I have, you'll see about 10 minutes worth of video showing what these technologies can do.
In this example, students are engaged in a virtual field trip to an aquarium. Now, the specific school here had a poverty level of over 90%, meaning 90% or more of the students couldn't afford their own lunches. They were government supplied, and they certainly couldn't afford a trip to any of the zoos. They had a bus but couldn't afford the gas to take the bus to the zoo. The principal of the school asked if we could provide them with a virtual experience and take them to places such as this aquarium you see here, where the students can become the fish in the aquarium and learn about the ecosystems that the fish live in virtually.
Let's quickly choose our personal goals.
It's not a video game, but it looks like one.
You guys have a couple to choose from.
Families were coming back saying, wow, what are you doing? Teachers that weren't sure what we were doing, just knew that kid was doing something, were coming to us and saying, can we have whatever you're doing because we're seeing changes at school.
College of Education faculty have developed curricula that uses a virtual world experience, like a video game, to help students with autism spectrum disorder learn social competency. It's called iSocial.
One of the things that the technology does, it allows us to bring the social experience to them in a little different way. So it can be brought to them in steps.
The curricula help kids build skills like idea sharing, turn-taking, and facial expression recognition. There are 5 units comprised of 6 lessons each.
The technology allows us to really craft the learning activity to the individual needs of the kids.
In this example, a virtual world is used to reconstruct exactly the Japanese virtual house from the Boston Children's Museum. This gives participants who have been there physically an opportunity to return virtually once they're home. It also allows for curators to provide remote presentations to those who can't physically attend. In this example, students are using a virtual world to construct a building. They've designed the building and now they're working together to virtually assemble it, something that couldn't be done in this timescale in the real world. Faculty can assess in precise detail who did what, as every virtual object is associated with the student that created it. The next Immersive Education Virtual World project was premiered at Immersive Education 2012 in Boston, also known as the Boston Summit.
EcoMove is an exciting new curriculum research project at the Harvard Graduate School of Education that uses immersive virtual environments to teach middle school students about ecosystems and causal patterns. It includes 2 computer-based modules, Pond and Forest, within a 4-week inquiry-based ecosystems curriculum. Here we are in the pond module. We can walk around the pond and see all the different plants and animals, like these ducks. The camera tool lets us take pictures, and saving the photo displays a virtual field guide with information about each of the organisms we find. We can also walk under the water to see the species living there. And using a virtual microsubmarine, we can shrink down and see the microscopic life in the pond at different levels of magnification. The environment around the pond includes features like a golf course, roads, and houses. Throughout the environment, on different days, we meet virtual characters like Manny, who may provide useful information. Back at the pond, the water measurement tools let us take various measurements of the water in the pond, such as phosphates and turbidity. Students can collect weather and population data as well. The calendar tool lets us travel through time in order to see how the pond has changed on different days. Here, it's raining. When we walk under the water, we can see how cloudy the water is. The turbidity is higher, and we can also take another measurement. The data view lets us see and compare data we've collected. The Atom Tracker tool lets us see what happens to atoms in the ecosystem over time. We can find and track 3 atoms: carbon, phosphorus, and oxygen. On each simulated day, we can find the atom tracker signs and read a description of what has happened to each atom since our last visit. Here we see an oxygen atom that is part of a water molecule in the leaf of a tree. And then on our next visit, we see that through photosynthesis, the oxygen atom is being released into the air as part of an O2 molecule. As students explore different days at the pond, they discover that on July 28th, all the large fish in the pond are dead. Through the inquiry-based curriculum, students work in teams to collect and analyze data in order to figure out what killed the fish.
Welcome to Fold It. Here we are in competition puzzle 50, strep binding. This protein is from a bacteria that causes strep throat. I'm Kathleen, and it looks like I'm currently rank 84, which means I have a long way to go to get to the top. I'm competing against all these other players to fold this protein the best and get the highest score I possibly can. Now let's take a look at the protein. This thick strand that bends all around is called the backbone. Notice it's made up of helices, which are these curly spirals, and these flat sheets. When the flat sheets get close, they form hydrogen bonds. I'll talk more about hydrogen bonds later. These dangly things coming off of the backbone are called side chains. They can move into a discrete number of positions based on their molecular structure. My goal here is to get the highest score possible. The score of this protein is calculated with the Rosetta energy function. The main thing that this score function takes into account is packing, or compactness. That is, I want the protein to take up as little volume as possible.
But when was the last time that you saw groups of students excited about math? I would make the recommendation that if there are other large school districts who are interested in sort of coming on board and providing a 21st century environment for 21st century students, that they should do this as well.
All right, New York, you ready?
The biggest benefits that we've seen in the classrooms where we've piloted this has been the engagement of students in algebra and the relevancy of mathematics that suddenly emerges in the students to want to learn algebra, actually to compete better in the game.
Teachers, educators need to know about this. There is no problem with it catching on. There is no problem with student usage. It's just a matter of fitting it into the curriculum.
At the ITEC 2011 Boston Summit, we premiered the Smithsonian Virtual Watershed and then brought it to the South Park Elementary School.
Okay, is there anybody that knows what kind of a bird that is? Austin.
A hawk?
A hawk? No, it could be. Anybody else have some ideas? Tim?
Falcon?
Oh.
Falcon?
A falcon? Okay, might be. Casey?
An eagle.
An eagle? All good ideas.
The students are interacting with the Smithsonian Virtual Watershed in what we call a corner cave. The two walls of an unused classroom in South Park were converted into a cave environment for students to explore at full size, actually larger than life, these virtual environments.
Sometimes hangs upside down from a tree.
And what part of his body would he use to do that with?
Its legs and its tail.
Okay, very nice.
After students became familiar with the virtual watershed inside of the cave environment, they were joined by Smithsonian researchers, in this case Mark Haddon of the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center. He's standing at the physical dock, right of which you see the virtual dock that the students are controlling and walking through virtually. In this way, they were joined by experts that they would never have met in their real classroom environment.
Yeah, now, I want to be sure that you can see this. This is a Maryland Diamondback terrapin. You see obstruction? Okay, but you can see, if you can, hopefully, the markings. See them? Here's the shell here. I'm kind of holding them. Okay. So Dinky is going to get back into his nice warm container and be taken back to the building. But I wanted to bring him out and show him to you right now. Okay, so everybody say goodbye to Dinky. Bye.
In this example, we see a 360-degree video, in this case of Krakow, one of UNESCO's historical places, and students and learners of all ages are able to use a trackpad to scroll left and right, up and down in all directions to see the environment as they're taken through it on a horse-drawn carriage. In the remaining examples, we see a variety of mixed reality applications where virtual objects are embedded and combined with the physical world. This mixed reality or augmented reality is becoming increasingly popular for immersive education. Here we see a youngster who for the first time has had mixed reality placed into his hands, and he immediately starts to make some judgment calls on how Earth's gravity might interact with a spaceship in one of his hands. Finally, we conclude with a variety of mixed and augmented reality applications in which learners of all ages interact with objects that are virtual, but they're superimposed and brought into their physical world so they can examine them as if they were actual physical objects. Items that they may never have an opportunity to experience in the real world now become possible in their own space, their own physical space.
All right. If you can hear me, just give me a little wave so I know you're still there. Oh, it's a big wave. All right, it worked. It's going well. Thank you. Well, I hope that gave you at least a general sense of some of the ways in which immersive education technologies are being utilized for teaching and training. It's really a drop in the bucket compared to the large number of projects that are now going on by our members around the world. When I first started working on this in about 1997, I think was the first time I really showed it to anybody, there was nothing. There were no examples at all. I had to tell people, imagine doing this, imagine doing that, imagine doing this. Now we can actually show and actually have results. Some studies are now being conducted as to how effective these environments are. So at this point, I'll proceed past the slide of the examples of immersive education, and I'm now on the ITEC certification slide. This to me is probably one of the most important things that we're going to be doing this year and maybe for the next 4 or 5 years. One of the issues that educators have is they get very excited about the technology. They don't really know where to begin, and they lose tons and tons of time trial and erroring how to figure out how to utilize these tools effectively. We're developing, to address that, a certification program that has 3 different levels. Level 1 is just very basic, very fast in terms of certification, but it teaches you the fundamentals and how to properly utilize a certain form of immersive education, such as a virtual world or some other learning environment. Once the fundamentals are in place, you can do quite a bit with it, but the problem is if you don't know those fundamentals, you can actually waste semester after semester of time figuring it out on your own while using your students as guinea pigs. So level 1 is meant to address that. Level 1 then gives way to level 2, which is 20 hours of intermediate work on top of level 1. And then level 3 is a total of 60 advanced hours where an educator is able to do just about everything that's necessary in that virtual environment, that immersive environment for teaching and training. These certification programs are going to be online and available free of charge. You'll be able to self-certify, so if it's not important that you have a stamp of approval from the initiative, you can self-certify, and for a modest initiative certified fee, which just basically covers the cost of verifying that you are certified, we will certify you with a certificate. We also have at our summits, which are our conferences, we call them summits, we have hands-on workshop that count as professional development towards certification. I'll advance to the next slide, which gives a short roadmap for certification. This year, we will be certifying a technology called Scratch that comes from MIT. We'll also be providing certification for virtual worlds. And also, it's possible, although I don't know if we're going to be able to get it all done in 2013, it might spill into the first quarter of 2014, we're going to be certifying utilization of a commercial video game called Minecraft for education. Out of curiosity, if you could just raise your hands, I can still see you. I'm not sure if you can see me, but have you heard of Minecraft before? Just who hasn't? Exactly. This is an example of a commercial virtual environment that we have very specific ways of utilizing it in the service of education, something that we call stealth learning. The kids don't realize that they're actually going through logic, mathematics, and predetermined learning courses as they're playing Minecraft. They just think they're having fun, but we're building certification around Minecraft as a stealth learning tool. The following year, we'll come out with our full augmented and mixed reality certification, and also something very interesting that we've just started to utilize in the initiative, 3D printing, where the content in the virtual world is able to be printed in the 3D world. I'll go ahead and skip through our standards process. If you're interested, the charter is online. The work that we do now is in groups. We do technology working groups and community groups. Standards are developed in technology groups, and the community self-organizes into community groups. That's the basic structure of immersive education. I'll move on to the next slide, which shows chapters, and I'll conclude with chapters. There are geographically distributed structure through which immersive education is distributed to regional local members. Chapters are allowed to run their own conferences, their workshops, lectures, and seminars, and all the chapters work together in a global network. As of this year, we have chapters in Western United States, Mid-Atlantic United States, New York, all of Europe, Mid-America, Australia, which I'll talk about in a moment, Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, Singapore, Kansas, and Missouri, and it continues to grow. Chapters are free to join, and there is a chapter in Australia that is being formed. Colin Wood, I don't know if Colin is in the audience, but Colin, if you are, if you could get, there he is, he's to my left. Colin can talk with you after. He's the founding board member of the Australian chapter, which is just getting started with faculty from other universities in Australia. We have a number of upcoming conferences, which we call summits. You're welcome to join us at any of those, and we're in the early stages of planning for one in Australia. I'll move on and mention that the Journal of Immersive Education, you can visit at jied.org, so you can get a number of early access publications there and more materials. So I'll jump on through because we're tight for time. I'm moving from Journal of Immersive Education to simple questions and answers. I've got a little bit of time, I think. I'll leave it up to Nick. Thank you, folks.
Probably got time for 2 questions, so if anyone does have a question, just pop your hand up and we will get a microphone to you.
Hello, how are you going?
Hi.
Hi. Just a question. We've tried using some virtual worlds, not one that you've mentioned there, but a different virtual world situation, Quest Atlantis, with some students in schools and through the universities, and we're facing really big issues to do with firewalls and bandwidth, and it's making it very clunky and not smooth sailing, which disengages students. So I know, clunky older technology, I know that. But how are those kind of things, those issues of firewalls and things addressed? Because I'm at University of Technology and we're facing massive issues trying to just get things moving smoothly.
Okay, if you can see my arms, all you can see are my pointy shoulders. This is how big that issue is. It is a massive problem. You hit it right on the head. I think that the network issues that you are describing have been holding immersive environments back in a way that we can't imagine. There is a technology that is just becoming available that is going to make it possible to visit virtual worlds entirely through your web browser. No plugin, just like a web page. So if you can get to a web page, you can get to the virtual environment. If you want to see how that works, go to JIED. That stands for Journal of Immersive Education, JIED.org, JIED.org, and you could read all the early access. You're getting a sneak peek at our journal. And once you enter into the journal, you'll see something called Horizons. Look at the Horizons tab. It talks about something, it's a technical term, it's WebGL, it's web graphics language. And if you have a modern browser, you'll be able to do all that stuff right there in your browser. The issue described is massive. It has been holding us back for almost 2 decades, and I'm really relieved to say that it is now at the stage where it's going to completely change. If you can get to a web page, you'll be able to get to a virtual environment. Thank you. You're welcome.
Ian.
My question is particularly a USA question, but it's also an Australian question. Worldwide, there's been a decline in historic place visiting, and it's particularly marked in the United States. You know, places like Colonial Williamsburg and less endowed places have this dramatic decline in visitors, and it's leading to real questions about whether they can continue their programs as their revenue falls. Does immersive education have a solution for that? Are there opportunities in relation to the virtual world to actually reactivate visiting to the real world?
Yeah, I think so. And if you can hear me, I think the answer to that is engaging virtual environments that are effectively, I hate to use the word, they're advertisements for the real world. As great as the virtual environment is, it's not the same as being in the real environment. And so when we did the project with the Children's Museum, with that Japanese house you saw earlier, they wanted to create a virtual world that anybody could visit to get to the Japanese house and use that as an advertisement for people to come to the actual museum in Boston and tour this 1950s Japanese house that was constructed in the museum. Similarly, any place around the world that is a historical site, well, not even a historical site, if the virtual environment is engaging enough and it gets out enough people, it creates a draw or an incentive for people to visit the physical world. And it goes in the opposite direction as well. Once you visit one of these places, you often want to go back. How do we do that today? We go through our photos, and maybe we share stories with friends who have been there. Oh, yeah, I was in that hotel that didn't have access to the internet from it. Colin and I will talk about it over coffee the next time we're here. We'll talk about this particular hotel. I can't come back here in person, however. I can do it through photographs today, and I can do it through conversations, but I could also do it immersively. So once you leave a place, you can return and then socialize with other people in that environment. So again, that example of the Japanese house at the Boston Children's Museum, they constructed also for visitors. Once they go home to wherever their home is around the world, they could come back and they could enter again and they could see the things they saw in person. So I think it's a two-way street. One is virtual environments to let people know what's out there, to incite them to come in almost as advertisements. And two is to support the growth and community of those places after someone has left that physical place. They still now have a virtual place to go and congregate. Okay. Hopefully that answered your question just a bit.
Tell me, did more people go visit the Japanese house?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that.
Did more people go and visit the Japanese house, Aaron, as a result of that?
It's a little bit cloudy, but you're asking if more people have visited. I think that's the question. Do more people? They have not opened up the virtual Japanese house yet. What I showed you was a preview of it. So they're banking on it. They spent a lot of money building it and constructing an entire virtual Japanese exhibit. That was just part of it that you saw. Also part of that was that students, I call them students, but visitors to the virtual museum will be able to create their own artifacts and place them in the museum. So it hasn't been open to the public yet, but the museum is anticipating that it will have a positive impact on members coming to the physical museum.
Okay. Please join me in thanking Dr. Aaron Walsh for joining us from